Okay, let's unpack this. Picture this. You just finished a meal, you're feeling satisfied, maybe even a little stuffed.
Right.
But then, maybe an hour later, that familiar little voice starts whispering about the snack drawer. Is that your body genuinely needing more fuel? Or is there maybe more to the story?
There's definitely more to it.
So this deep dive, we're cracking open the surprisingly complex world of hunger. And believe me, it's way more than just a rumbling tummy. We've got Althea K. Brewer's book, The Hunger Management Alternative, as our source today.
A really interesting read.
And our goal is pretty simple.
Yeah.
To understand why you might feel hungry even after eating, and more importantly, give you real science-backed ways to manage that hunger naturally.
Yeah, without those endless willpower battles.
Exactly. Forget fad diets. This is about getting smart about your hunger hormones and maybe breaking free from that cycle of overeating and craving.
That's right. I mean, most of us think hunger is straightforward. Empty stomach equals need for food. Simple.
Seems logical.
But as our source points out, that's really only half the picture. There's a critical difference between physical hunger, your body's genuine need for fuel.
The real deal.
Yeah, the real deal. It comes on gradually, can be satisfied by pretty much anything, follows a natural rhythm, and crucially stops when you're full.
Okay.
And then there's emotional hunger. Think of that more as craving-based.
Okay.
It hits suddenly, often triggered by things like stress, maybe boredom, usually for very specific comfort foods, sugary, salty, carby things.
Definitely know that feeling.
And it can happen even when you're physically full and often leaves you feeling, well, kind of guilty afterwards.
Yeah.
The book really emphasizes that what often feels like hunger is actually this emotional pull.
Totally relatable.
Yeah.
I think we've all had that moment where we're not really hungry, but suddenly only like a specific type of chocolate will do.
Exactly.
So if it's not just our stomachs calling the shots, what else is at play here?
Okay, so if we zoom out a bit, we need to look at some key hormones that are sort of orchestrating our hunger signals. The big two are leptin and ghrelin.
Leptin, ghrelin.
Okay, let's start with leptin. Think of leptin as your body's fullness signal, or maybe the off switch.
The off switch, I like that.
It's produced mainly by your fat cells, and its job is to tell your brain, okay, we've got enough fuel, enough energy stored.
Got it.
It also plays a role in things like regulating your metabolism, fat burning, even immune response.
So ideally, how is it supposed to work?
Ideally, it's a smooth process. You eat, your fat cells release leptin.
Right.
Your brain gets the message, okay, enough food here, you feel satisfied, and your body efficiently uses those calories.
Sounds like a great system. So why doesn't it always work perfectly? Why do we still feel hungry?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it leads us to this really important concept called leptin resistance.
Leptin resistance, okay.
Imagine your brain has like a doorbell for the I'm full message. With leptin resistance, it's like that doorbell has been rung so many times, maybe too loudly, that the brain just stops answering it. It becomes resistant.
So the signal isn't getting through.
Exactly. Even though someone might have plenty of fat cells producing lots of leptin, their brain just doesn't hear that I'm full message anymore.
Wow. And what happens then?
Well, the result is the body mistakenly thinks it's starving, even when it has plenty of energy reserves, like in fat stores.
So it keeps sending hunger signals.
Precisely. This can lead to constant hunger, a slower metabolism because the body thinks it needs to conserve energy, and stronger cravings, especially for those high-calorie foods.
And it sounds like a vicious cycle.
It really is. Because eating the wrong kinds of foods, the very foods you might crave because of this, can actually make the resistance worse.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So what are the common things that can, as that doorbell, what causes leptin resistance?
The book points to a few main culprits. Processed foods are a big one.
No surprise there.
Yeah, especially those loaded with refined carbs, sugar, and unhealthy fats. These cause big spikes in insulin.
And insulin interferes.
Right. These insulin spikes can interfere with how leptin signals to the brain. Constant overeating can also overload the system, just too much leptin all the time.
Okay.
Not getting enough sleep is another major factor. It really messes with leptin levels. And chronic stress.
That's stress again.
Always stress, right? It raises cortisol, and cortisol can also block leptin from doing its job effectively. And finally, inflammation in the body can hinder that communication too.
So it's not just about feeling hungry.
No, when leptin isn't working well, it also affects how your body burns calories thermogenesis, and it can contribute to more inflammation systemically. It's all connected.
Wow, it really is all interconnected.
Hmm.
Are there any clear signs that someone might be dealing with leptin resistance? Things you might notice?
Yeah, the book lists some common red flags, things like constantly feeling hungry, even right after eating a decent meal, never really feeling properly satisfied after you eat, experiencing really intense cravings, especially for those sugary, carb-heavy processed foods,
Yeah.
hitting a frustrating plateau with weight loss, even when you feel like you're trying to eat well and exercise.
That's a common one.
Definitely, feeling mentally foggy or just tired a lot, and constantly needing to snack between meals.
Okay, that list might be hitting a little too close to home for some of us listening, myself included maybe. So, what are some initial steps we can take? How do we start improving our leptin sensitivity?
Well, the good news is you're not necessarily stuck with it. The book suggests starting with balancing your diet. That means cutting back on processed foods
Right?
and focusing more on lean protein, healthy fats, think avocados, nuts, omega-3 rich fish.
Good stuff.
Being strategic with when you eat can also make a difference. Maybe considering some form of intermittent fasting, or at least avoiding eating really late at night.
Meal timing. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. And prioritizing sleep, really aiming for those 7 to 9 hours,
Wow.
and finding ways to manage stress are huge. Think meditation, deep breathing, maybe tapping, which I might touch on later. And finally, incorporating some strength training and just regular movement helps your body become more responsive to leptin signals overall.
That's really encouraging. So leptin is the off switch. Now let's flip the coin. Let's talk about the on switch ghrelin. What's its role in this whole hunger picture?
Okay, ghrelin. It's essentially leptin's counterpart. It's often called the hunger hormone.
The hunger hormone. Makes sense.
It's produced mainly in your stomach lining, and it gets released when your stomach is empty. Its main job, to make you feel hungry. It signals to your brain that it's time to seek out food.
So it's the rumble trigger.
Pretty much. As your stomach empties, ghrelin levels rise, your brain gets the I'm hungry message, maybe you start experiencing cravings, you eat, and then as your stomach fills, ghrelin levels drop, signaling satiety, that feeling of fullness, and the whole cycle begins again.
So it's a natural, necessary signal.
Absolutely. It's a fundamental survival mechanism telling us when we need fuel.
Okay, so it sounds like leptin and ghrelin are doing a bit of a hormonal dance or maybe a seesaw act. When one is high, the other should ideally be low.
Exactly. The book uses that seesaw analogy, and it's a really good one. When leptin is high, signaling you're full, ghrelin should ideally be low.
Right.
And when ghrelin is high, signaling hunger, leptin should be decreasing. They counterbalance each other.
But what happens when that balance gets thrown off?
Well, that's when we can run into trouble. You might find yourself feeling hungry even when your body doesn't truly need food.
Phantom hunger.
Sort of. You might struggle with really intense cravings, especially for sugary and high-carb options. You might experience hunger pangs late at night, leading to snacking when you should be winding down.
Okay.
And it can even affect your mood and energy, feeling tired, irritable, maybe mentally foggy if you haven't eaten recently, even if it hasn't been that long.
So what are some of the common culprits that can cause ghrelin to go a bit haywire and lead to these problems?
The book highlights a few key factors, and they might sound familiar. Poor sleep is a big one.
Sleep again?
It keeps coming up, doesn't it? Research has shown that even just one night of not getting enough sleep can significantly increase your ghrelin levels, sometimes by up to 30%.
Wow, that's a lot from one bad night.
It is. And this can lead to eating more overall, specifically craving those high-carb comfort foods, potentially weight gain, and those late-night trips to the fridge.
Okay, but what else?
Chronic stress also plays a big role. Stress increases cortisol, as we mentioned, and cortisol can, in turn, boost ghrelin levels. This often drives emotional eating and those cravings for familiar comfort foods. Stress also reduces leptin release, so it's a double whammy.
Right.
And interestingly, eating too frequently, like constant grazing or snacking throughout the day, can also disrupt ghrelin's natural rhythm. Normally, ghrelin peaks before meals to signal hunger and then drops sharply afterwards. If you're eating all the time, ghrelin doesn't get those clear peaks and troughs, and over time, this might actually make us less sensitive to its signals.
Okay, so even more reasons to really prioritize getting good sleep and finding healthy ways to manage stress.
Yeah.
What are some natural strategies the book suggests to help keep our ghrelin levels in check?
Definitely. The book offers several practical tips. Making deep, restful sleep a non-negotiable priority, aiming for 7 to 9 hours, keeping a consistent schedule, creating a cool, dark, quiet sleep environment, that's number one.
Crucial.
Finding healthy ways to reduce stress is key too. Whatever works for you. Deep breathing exercises, meditation, yoga, spending time in nature, maybe that EFT tapping. It helps keep cortisol and therefore ghrelin in better balance.
Makes sense.
Then there's being mindful about meal timing, trying to avoid constant snacking, maybe aiming for 2 or 3 structured meals a day. Exploring intermittent fasting could also help regulate ghrelin's natural cycle. Starting the day with a high-protein breakfast is also mentioned as helpful.
And food choices.
Yes, definitely. Choosing foods that help regulate ghrelin can be really beneficial. Things rich in protein like eggs, chicken, fish, Greek yogurt, tofu tend to suppress ghrelin effectively.
Protein power.
Healthy fats like avocados, nuts, olive oil, fatty fish, and fiber-rich choices, vegetables, chia seeds, legumes, whole grains, they help with fullness and slow digestion, which helps keep ghrelin stable.
Okay, so we've talked about what we eat affecting leptin and ghrelin, and you just touched on with the idea of snacking and meal structure. The book also talks about this strategic feeding cycle. What's the thinking behind that concept?
This really emphasizes that when you eat can be just as important, maybe even more so sometimes, than what you eat when it comes to managing your hunger and metabolism.
Really? As important as what?
Well, the book explains that our bodies operate on a natural 24-hour cycle called the circadian rhythm. We all know about it for sleep, but it affects much more.
Right, our internal clock.
Exactly. And this rhythm influences all sorts of things, including when we naturally feel hungry, how efficiently our bodies burn fat versus storing it, and how our metabolism functions throughout the day.
So how does it typically work across the day?
Generally speaking, in the morning, our bodies are more primed for digestion and tend to be more sensitive to insulin. Energy levels often peak in the afternoon,
Okay.
making that a potentially good time for more substantial, nutrient-dense meals. Then, as evening approaches, our digestion naturally slows down, and our bodies become a bit more geared towards storing excess calories, potentially as fat.
So by being more mindful of these natural daily rhythms, we can actually get a better handle on our hunger hormones, like working with our body clock instead of against it.
Exactly, that's the core idea. When you align your eating patterns more closely with your body's natural circadian rhythm, the book suggests it can lead to lower ghrelin levels, meaning less unnecessary hunger and fewer cravings.
That sounds good.
It can also lead to improved leptin sensitivity, giving you better appetite control overall, and potentially a shift towards burning more fat for energy rather than storing it.
Okay.
So the strategic feeding cycle described in the book provides a kind of framework for putting this into practice.
All right, give us the rundown. What does this strategic cycle actually look like in practice?
It's essentially broken down into a 3-phase approach throughout the day. Phase 1 focuses on the start of your day,
Breakfast time.
either having a protein-rich breakfast or potentially delaying your first meal a bit if you're doing intermittent fasting and then breaking your fast with protein. Protein is really key first thing or whenever you break your fast because it helps blunt ghrelin and keeps you feeling fuller for longer. Think eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, tofu, lean meats.
Okay, protein first. What's phase 2?
Phase 2 suggests making your largest meal of the day your midday meal, ideally somewhere between, say, 12 p.m. and 3 p.m.
Lunchtime focus.
Right, that's when your metabolism is generally considered most active. This meal should ideally prioritize lean protein, healthy fats, and plenty of fiber to help keep your blood sugar stable and maybe ward off those late afternoon or evening cravings.
Got it. And phase 3?
Phase 3 involves having a lighter dinner and, importantly, trying to eat it before 7 p.m. or at least a few hours before you go to bed.
Avoid late night eating.
Exactly. Eating late can raise ghrelin and decrease leptin sensitivity overnight, so the book suggests keeping dinner relatively light and focused on protein and vegetables, maybe some grilled chicken or fish with steamed veggies.
What if you do get hungry later in the evening?
If you do feel you need a little something, the recommendation is to opt for something small and maybe protein-focused, like a small handful of nuts, some plain yogurt, or perhaps just a cup of herbal tea.
That sounds like a pretty balanced and sustainable approach, actually. Are there any extra tips in the book to help really dial this strategic cycle in?
Yes, definitely. It offers a few additional strategies to optimize the cycle. One is considering a consistent overnight fasting window, maybe 12 hours, or even up to 16 hours for some people. This naturally helps lower ghrelin and improve leptin sensitivity over time.
Like time-restricted eating.
Exactly. It's also really important to try and avoid those late-night snacks driven by habit or emotion, as they can really throw off your hormonal balance.
Hmm.
Being mindful about when you eat most of your carbohydrates, with midday generally being a better time than right before bed, can also be helpful for leptin sensitivity and blood sugar control.
Good point.
And, as we've already touched on, staying well hydrated throughout the day and prioritizing getting enough quality sleep are absolutely fundamental supports for this whole cycle. That is good.
It sounds like there's a real wealth of additional information and practical tools available in those extra materials for anyone who wants to delve even deeper into these fascinating and complex topics. Well, this has truly been quite a deep dive into the complexities of hunger.
It really has, hasn't it? And I think if there's one key takeaway from all of this, drawing from the source material, it's that hunger is so much more than just a simple biological signal telling us we need to eat.
Right, it's not just an empty stomach.
Not at all. It's this really intricate dance, isn't it? A complex interplay of biological factors, our hormones like leptin and ghrelin, our daily rhythms, our sleep quality, our stress levels, and, crucially, our psychological state, our thoughts, emotions, and learned habits. They're all working together or sometimes against each other.
Absolutely, and we really hope that you, our listener, now have a much clearer, maybe more nuanced understanding of the various forces that can influence your appetite and your relationship with food. We strongly encourage you to maybe take some time after this to reflect on your own personal hunger patterns. When do you feel hungry? What triggers cravings for you? Is it usually physical or emotional?
That self-awareness is such a powerful first step.
It really is. And then maybe think about implementing just one or two of these science-backed strategies that we've discussed today, drawn from the hunger management alternative, something that feels manageable and resonates with you.
Indeed. It's really about empowering yourself with knowledge, isn't it? So you can start to take control and build a healthier, perhaps more intuitive and peaceful relationship with food. One that's based more on truly understanding your body's genuine signals,
Yeah.
rather than just constantly relying on sheer willpower, which we know often fails us in the long run. So true. So here's a final thought to leave you with. Now that you know hunger isn't just about needing food, what's maybe one small change you could make, starting today, to begin shifting your own relationship with your appetite? And what new questions about your body's signals, about your own hunger, have perhaps emerged for you during this discussion?
That's definitely something to chew on, isn't it?